Most people think they're doing everything right and still feel stuck. They read, they practice, they visualize, they affirm. Yet deep down, there's a quiet tension, like life is always about to start, but never quite does. And what if the very act of seeking is the reason nothing seems to change? Here's the uncomfortable truth most teachings won't tell you. Seeking feels responsible, but it secretly confirms lack. It feels like progress, but it keeps you anchored in not yet. Neville Goddard taught something radically different, that the moment you stop searching, reality begins to move. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally shifted who you're being. This isn't about positive thinking, forcing belief, or waiting for signs. It's about a subtle inner position that changes everything without effort, a state where relief replaces urgency, where answers come without chasing, and where money, peace, and fulfillment stop feeling distant. The question is simple, but confronting it can change your entire relationship with life. Are you being, or just seeking? He begins by pointing out something almost no one questions. Seeking feels productive. It looks active, responsible, even noble. Yet beneath that motion, there's a quiet confession being made. The moment someone is seeking, they are affirming absence. And absence, once accepted, tends to repeat itself. He's seen it countless times. People reading one more book, watching one more video, trying one more technique. They say they're committed, but what they're really committed to is the story that something is missing. This is the subtle trap behind being versus seeking Neville Goddard spoke about so often. Seeking feels safe because it avoids responsibility for being. He explains it with a simple image. Imagine looking for your glasses while they're already on your face. Every step you take to find them confirms the belief that you don't have them. The search itself becomes proof of lack. That's why Neville Goddard insisted that the solution is never more searching, but a shift in state. When someone finally pauses, really pauses, and stops seeking manifestation, something uncomfortable happens. Silence, stillness, no chasing, no checking, no asking, is it working? And in that quiet, the old identity starts to loosen its grip. Being begins the moment searching ends. He often jokes that the ego hates this part because it can't take credit. There's nothing to do, nowhere to go, no lever to pull, just an internal decision. What if I already am? That question alone starts dissolving the habit of seeking. This is where live in the end, Neville method stops being a concept and becomes experiential. Living in the end doesn't mean pretending or forcing positivity. It means recognizing that searching and being cannot coexist. One cancels the other out. He recalls a moment from his own life when he stopped asking how money would come, not because he figured it out, but because he was tired of the tension. The relief he felt wasn't excitement, it was normalcy. And that normalcy was the doorway into being. Most people miss this because they expect fireworks, they expect instant joy or overwhelming confidence, but being often feels ordinary, almost boring. And that's precisely how you know you're no longer seeking. The shift is subtle but decisive. Seeking is loud, filled with inner dialogue and questions. Being is quiet, grounded, and unconcerned with proof. That quiet confidence doesn't announce itself, it settles in. Once this distinction is felt, not understood but felt, it becomes impossible to unsee. The question is no longer how to get, but whether one is willing to stop looking altogether. And that question naturally opens the door to something Neville hinted at repeatedly, what it really means when creation is already complete. He gently introduces an idea that initially feels unsettling to most people. Neville taught that creation is finished. Not finished as a metaphor, but finished as a fact of consciousness, Nothing new needs to be created, attracted, or earned. Everything already exists as a state waiting to be occupied. At first, this clashes with how people were raised. They were taught to build, chase, improve, and become. So when they hear creation is finished explained through Neville Goddard's lens, the mind protests. If it's finished, why don't I see it? And that question itself reveals the misunderstanding. He explains it like a radio dial. All stations already exist simultaneously. You don't create the music, you tune into it. Fulfillment works the same way. You don't find it in the world. You enter it by assuming the identity of the one who already has it. This is where identity quietly replaces effort. Neville Goddard emphasized that manifestation is never about things, but about who one is being. The moment someone assumes the inner posture of fulfillment, the outer world is forced to rearrange, not by effort, but by law. He often points out how people say, "Once I have the money, I'll feel secure." Neville flipped that entirely. Feel secure first, and the money follows as a shadow. That's the wish-fulfilled state practice in its simplest form: identity first, evidence later. He shares a story of someone who stopped visualizing outcomes and instead started moving through life as if the issue was already resolved. Their tone changed, their decisions softened. They stopped explaining themselves, and within weeks, circumstances shifted in ways they couldn't have planned. The mistake people make is thinking assumption means imagination alone. But assumption is deeper than imagery. It's an internal consent, a quiet yes to a new self-definition. That's why feeling it real. Neville Goddard matters more than seeing it vividly. When identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. There's no forcing, no discipline, no pretending. Actions arise from the state, not from willpower. And those actions often look surprisingly ordinary to outsiders. This is why Neville warned against waiting for signs. Signs follow, they never precede. The one who assumes fulfillment doesn't scan reality for proof. They live as if proof is inevitable, because in consciousness it already happened. Once this clicks, seeking starts to feel unnecessary, even illogical. Why look for what already exists? The real work becomes internal positioning, not external movement. And that naturally raises a subtle but crucial confusion most people fall into next: the belief that effort equals progress. He leans in at this point because this is where many sincere people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They mistake effort for progress. Movement feels productive, so they assume more effort means they're getting closer. But seeking keeps someone busy without ever relocating them internally. He compares it to walking on a treadmill. You're sweating, your legs are burning, and everything feels intense, yet you're in the exact same place. Seeking does that to the mind. It creates exhaustion without transformation. Being, on the other hand, quietly changes your position in consciousness. Neville Goddard warned about this subtle trap often. He observed that the more someone tries to make something happen, the more they reinforce the state of not having it. This is why stop seeking manifestation isn't laziness. It's intelligence. He gives an everyday example: someone refreshing their bank app multiple times a day. Each refresh feels like action, but emotionally, it's rooted in lack. The act itself keeps the nervous system locked in not enough. Being would mean not needing to check at all. This is where people get uncomfortable. If effort isn't the key, then what is? The answer is deceptively simple: a shift in self-concept. Progress isn't measured by what you do, but by who you're being while you do it. He recalls how when he stopped trying to control outcomes, his decisions became cleaner. He said less. He forced nothing. Opportunities seemed to meet him halfway, not because he chased them, but because his state had changed. Effort belongs to the old identity trying to earn a future. Being belongs to the new identity resting in the present. One feels tense and urgent. The other feels grounded and inevitable. That contrast is unmistakable once noticed. This doesn't mean no action happens. Action still occurs, but it's inspired, not compulsive. It comes from clarity, not fear. That's the difference Neville Goddard was pointing to when he spoke about naturalness. Most people never experience this because they equate struggle with virtue. They believe if it's hard, it must be working. But consciousness doesn't respond to struggle. It responds to assumption. When effort falls away, something else takes its place. Presence. And presence anchors someone in now, not someday. Which brings up the quiet realization that seeking always lives in the future, while being only exists in one place. He makes a subtle but powerful distinction here. When someone is seeking, they are always living in not yet. Not yet enough money, not yet free, not yet secure. The future becomes a psychological waiting room where life is endlessly postponed. This habit often starts early. Phrases like "one day" or "when things get better" sneak into everyday language. Without realizing it, people train themselves to believe fulfillment is always ahead, never now. Seeking locks consciousness into that delayed mode. Neville Goddard emphasized that creation only responds in the present. The future is a mental construct, useful for planning but useless for transformation. When someone lives in not yet, they are literally outside the creative moment. Being, by contrast, collapses time. It doesn't ask when, it rests in now. And now is the only place where assumption can be impressed. That's why Live in the End. Neville method isn't about a future visualization, it's about a present identity. He explains it like ordering food at a restaurant. Once the order is placed, you don't keep ordering it again every 5 minutes. You relax, talk, and trust it's coming. Seeking keeps reordering. Being knows it's already done. This is where anxiety quietly dissolves. Anxiety feeds on waiting. The moment someone shifts into now, the nervous system relaxes. And that relaxation is not passive, it's creative. He's noticed that people often fear the present because they associate it with their current circumstances. But being now doesn't mean accepting appearances as final. It means choosing a state regardless of appearances. Neville Goddard called this faith, but not blind faith. It's experiential faith, the kind that feels calm, settled, and grounded. It doesn't argue with reality, it assumes a deeper one. When someone truly lives in now, they stop asking how long it will take. Time becomes irrelevant. The question shifts from, when will it happen, to, who am I being right now? And once that question is asked sincerely, it naturally leads into a practical moment. Not theory, not philosophy, but an inner check-in that changes everything. A simple practice that bridges seeking and being. He slows the pace here because this is where everything becomes practical. Not complicated, practical. He invites the listener to ask a simple question. How would I feel if this were already true? Not how would I celebrate, not how would I show it, but how would it feel quietly, internally? Most people answer too quickly. They jump to excitement or relief without noticing the tension underneath. He encourages staying with the question a little longer, letting the body respond before the mind tries to perform. This is the wish-fulfilled state practice Neville Goddard lived by. At first, the feeling may be subtle. It might show up as a soft exhale, a loosening in the shoulders, or a mental, "Oh, okay, that's enough." Feeling it real, Neville Goddard never meant intensity. It meant naturalness. The mistake is trying to improve the feeling. People think they need to amplify it, polish it, or hold on to it. But the moment they try to enhance it, they slip back into effort. Being doesn't need improvement. He suggests resting in the feeling the same way you rest after sitting down. You don't adjust the chair every second. You simply let your weight settle. That's how assumption stabilizes. This practice works best when done casually, while washing dishes, walking, or lying in bed. No candles, no rituals required. Just a quiet internal shift that says, "This is already resolved." He shares that when he first applied this, he was surprised by how ordinary it felt. No fireworks, no rush of emotion. And that ordinariness confused him until he realized that fulfilled desires feel normal by definition. The moment someone can sit with the feeling without checking reality, without asking if it's working, they've crossed a threshold. They're no longer seeking confirmation, they're embodying completion. Neville Goddard often warned that forcing emotion blocks manifestation. The state must feel effortless, like something already familiar. That familiarity is the signature of being. Once this feeling becomes accessible, something else begins to change naturally. The emotional tone shifts from wanting to allowing, and that shift reveals the real pivot point most people overlook. He emphasizes that feeling is not decoration, it's the pivot point. Not emotion as drama, but emotion as inner atmosphere. When someone crosses from seeking into being, the first signs are surprisingly quiet. Relief, calm, and a sense of "this is handled." Relief is especially telling. It shows up when the mind stops negotiating with reality. No more mental bargaining, no more silent pleading. Just a grounded sense that the pressure is off. That relief signals the state has shifted. Calm follows naturally. Not forced calm, but the kind that makes urgency feel unnecessary. Questions like, "What if it doesn't work?" lose their charge. This is how feeling it real Neville Goddard manifests internally before anything moves outside. Naturalness is the final marker. The desire stops feeling special. It blends into daily life. When someone thinks about it, there's no spike, just neutrality. Neville Goddard said this neutrality was proof the wish was assumed. He explains that people often misinterpret this as losing desire. In truth, they've lost tension, not intention. The desire didn't disappear, it integrated into identity. He recalls how once this happened for him, he stopped talking about his goals. Not out of secrecy, but because there was nothing to explain. Talking felt redundant, like explaining something already obvious. This is where being versus seeking Neville Goddard becomes undeniable. Seeking is emotionally noisy. Being is emotionally settled. One asks, the other allows. When someone reaches this point, they often worry they're doing nothing. He reassures them that consciousness is already doing the work. The seed has been planted. Digging it up won't make it grow faster. The irony is that this calm state is exactly what people were chasing through effort. They thought the result would bring peace, but peace was the result they needed to assume. And once peace becomes stable, a new challenge quietly appears. The outer world may not immediately reflect the shift, testing whether one will return to searching or remain anchored. He prepares the listener for a moment that surprises many. The outer world may lag behind. After the internal shift, reality doesn't always update instantly, and this delay is where most people abandon being and slip back into seeking. When nothing seems to change, the old habit kicks in. They start scanning for signs, checking progress, wondering if they did something wrong. But Neville Goddard was clear. This is not the moment to search again. It's the moment to persist quietly. He compares it to adjusting a mirror. You move first, and the reflection follows. Staring at the mirror and moving again won't speed it up. Persisting in the state is the only thing that matters. This persistence isn't effort. It's loyalty to the identity you've entered. No affirmations on repeat, no techniques to fix reality. Just an internal refusal to go back to the old story. He often says, this is where maturity shows up. Can someone remain internally fulfilled even when circumstances disagree? That's where Live in the End Neville method becomes embodied, not intellectual. He shares a moment when bills still showed up after he felt the shift. Instead of panicking, he noticed his reaction had changed. There was no urgency. And that emotional difference mattered more than the numbers. Neville Goddard called this faithfulness, not blind belief, but consistency of state. The world must conform, because it has no choice but to reflect consciousness. Seeking tries to speed things up. Being allows timing to unfold naturally, and natural timing often looks slower to the anxious mind, but faster in results. The key is subtle discipline. Not controlling thoughts, but noticing when the old identity tries to re-enter. When it does, he gently returns to the feeling of completion without argument. This is why stop seeking manifestation isn't a one-time decision. It's a quiet commitment renewed in small moments. And as this commitment stabilizes, something else begins to appear, early signs that confirm the shift without being chased. He points out that signs do appear, but never the way people expect when they're seeking. When someone is being instead of searching, the signs arrive softly, almost casually. And the first one is internal, a noticeable drop in urgency. Urgency fades because there's nothing to chase anymore. The constant need to figure it out dissolves. Questions that once felt pressing now feel optional. That's one of the clearest indicators that the state has shifted. Another sign is fewer questions altogether. When someone is seeking, they're always asking, should I do this? Is this the right step? What does this mean? Being doesn't need constant clarification. It operates from quiet knowing. Then come the synchronicities. Not dramatic miracles, but small confirmations that feel personal. A conversation overheard, a phrase repeated in different places, a chance encounter. They don't excite, they reassure. He explains that synchronicities feel different when you're being. You don't cling to them or analyze them to death. You smile, nod internally, and move on. That emotional neutrality is key. Neville Goddard warned that signs follow, they never lead. When people chase signs, they return to seeking. But when signs appear uninvited, they simply mirror the internal alignment already achieved. He remembers noticing opportunities showing up without effort, not because he was hunting them, but because his state made him visible to them. The outer world started cooperating without negotiation. Another subtle sign is patience without waiting. There's no sense of delay, even if time passes. Life feels full now, not paused until something arrives. That fullness is proof of embodiment. People often doubt this stage because it feels too easy. They expect manifestation to feel intense. But ease is the evidence. Strain belongs to seeking, not being. As these signs accumulate, confidence stabilizes without needing reinforcement. And when confidence becomes stable, a deeper shift happens. Methods lose their appeal, and identity takes over completely. He notes that deep embodiment changes priorities without effort. The person who once jumped from method to method now feels no pull to chase techniques. The hunger for new formulas fades because the state itself feels sufficient. Methods were never the power. They were training wheels. Neville Goddard emphasized that once the state is assumed, techniques become optional. Consciousness leads and reality follows automatically. At this stage, signs lose importance too. Not because they stop appearing, but because they're no longer needed for reassurance. Confidence is internal, not borrowed from external validation. He explains that when state becomes stable, reactions change first. Things that once triggered fear or impatience now pass without sticking. That emotional neutrality signals mastery more than excitement ever could. This is where being versus seeking Neville Goddard becomes lived experience. Seeking asks, "Am I doing it right?" Being doesn't ask, it knows. And that knowing isn't loud or arrogant, it's quiet and grounded. He shares how in this phase decisions feel simpler. There's less overthinking, less second-guessing. Action arises naturally, often in unexpected ways because it's aligned with identity. Reality responds differently here. Opportunities feel timely. Delays feel purposeful instead of frustrating. Even challenges arrive without the old emotional charge. This is why Neville insisted that assumption is creative power itself. Once identity is stable, the world has no option but to rearrange. Creation doesn't negotiate, it reflects. People often describe this stage as everything working out without me trying. That's not luck, that's alignment. The outer world finally caught up to the inner shift. And when someone reaches this point, a final, honest question naturally arises. Not asked out of doubt, but out of clarity. A question that determines whether the state will remain permanent or quietly fade. He invites a pause here, not for drama, but for honesty. After everything explored, one question remains unavoidable. Is the person truly being, or are they still quietly seeking? Not judging, just noticing. Awareness alone begins to dissolve illusion. Many people realize they've been mixing the two. They feel aligned for a moment, then sneak back into checking, fixing, or waiting. That doesn't mean failure. It simply means the habit of seeking is familiar, and familiarity can feel like truth. Neville Goddard often implied that this choice is always available now, not later. Being isn't something earned through consistency or time. It's a decision made in the present, again and again, until it stabilizes. He explains that choosing being feels strangely anticlimactic. There's no announcement, no inner ceremony, just a quiet settling into "this is done." And that quietness is what makes it real. Seeking asks the world to change first. Being changes self-definition and lets the world catch up. One argues with reality, the other allows reality to reveal what was already arranged. This is where creation is finished. Explained stops being philosophy and becomes lived experience. Nothing new enters life. What was always there becomes visible. The missing piece was never outside. He encourages the listener not to dramatize the choice. Being doesn't require perfection or constant awareness. It requires willingness to stop pretending fulfillment is somewhere else. The moment someone chooses being, even briefly, tension releases. The body recognizes truth before the mind does. That recognition is subtle, but unmistakable. From that place, life feels less like a chase and more like a reveal. Events line up without pressure. Answers arrive without interrogation. The world mirrors the state effortlessly. And standing there in that quiet clarity, the question isn't how to manifest anymore. It's simply whether one will remain who they've already discovered themselves to be. Take a moment and sit with what you've heard. Not to analyze it, not to improve it, but to feel into it. Ask yourself, where in your life have you been moving, searching, trying, instead of simply being? And what would shift if, just for today, you stopped asking how and rested in done? Notice how often the mind wants proof before permission, how it waits for circumstances to change before allowing peace. And then ask the deeper question, what if peace is the signal, not the reward? What if the version of you who already lives this truth is available right now, without effort? You don't need another technique. You don't need more information. You need presence. The willingness to choose a state and let life reorganize around it. That choice, made quietly and consistently, is where real transformation begins. So as you move forward, stay aware. When urgency appears, return to being. When doubt speaks, settle into identity. And when life responds, as it always does, receive it without surprise, because this was never about getting something new. If this perspective shifted something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can keep deepening this understanding and living it, not just learning it. The more you embody it, the more effortlessly life will meet you there,